Happy New Year! New year, new reading goals, more books to read, and probably more books to be put on my TBR. Welcome back to my channel if you're new. Today we are going to be talking about the 23 books that I'll be reading in 2023. I don't know why I did that, I just felt like it. Anyways, so 23 books. I have set a reading goal for about 60 books for this year. Last year I did really well. Initially, I set a goal in 2022 for 35 books, and I well surpassed that. I read a total of 53 books, mostly because in September, I don't know what happened. I had a whole binge read, marathon going on. Anyway, so 60 books is my goal for this year. I already finished one book, The Shattered City, but that's just because I was already into it before the year started. Nonetheless, it still counts as my first book of the year. So let's get into the 23 books that I'm most excited to read in 2023. So the very first book that I'm very excited to read is a Celeste Ng book. Celeste Ng wrote a bunch of very popular books if you are a well-established reader, as Little Fires Everywhere. She wrote it recently and not too long published a new one called I already forgot what it was called, but it's like the pretty blue one with the feather on it. That she's always been like an author I've always seen in Indigo and everything. I feel like she's well established in the community, and I've always wanted to pick up her book because I know it's fairly popular. The second book I would love to read is, no surprise to anyone, Babel by R.F. Kuang. She is an amazing author. I have read book one of the Poppy War series. It is amazing, but I have heard incredible things about Babel. I know it's like urban fantasy, and it's like dark academia, which is like super interesting because I love that setting. I heard it's really emotional at the ending, but I'm always like, why is everyone crying at the end of this book? Like, what's so amazing about it? And it's only a standalone, I think, so that would be amazing. One book and you're done. Book number 3 on this list is going to be A Curse for True Love by Stephanie Garber, aka the final book of the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. It is set to release, I believe, in September or early October in 2023. I could be wrong. Anyway, that is the final book in the series and the conclusion to Jackson Evangeline's story. We do have some teasers of what it's supposed to be about. It's supposed to be like some kind of love triangle now between Jax, Evangeline, and Apollo. I really love the series just because I'm a huge romance fantasy junkie. That's just my thing. And I love the characters, and I love Stephanie's writing. Very flowery, whimsical, pretty, that kind of thing. Very fairy tale-esque. Book number 4 on my list is going to be As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow. So one of the booktubers I watch on a regular basis is Allison Pages, and she's been raving about this book recently, about how amazing it is and how different the story is and how just gritty and just like heart-wrenching the tale is. So I'm really interested in reading it. It is, I believe, YA contemporary fiction. It's not fantasy, but I know it's interesting and it's relatively short, I believe, as a standalone. Book number 5. This is more like an author I want to read again, but I kind of group it in the same number. So number 5 would be The Kite Runner and A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. Now, these books are well known to be very emotionally heartbreaking reads. Let me tell you why. My family, my mom and my sister, never read a book at all. They have read The Kite Runner, and it's like easily the most saddest thing they've ever read. They don't read another book because of that. But basically, they said that's like my favorite book of all time. So I know it's going to be amazing. I just hope it's going to be like that amazing when I read it. So I want to be in a good mental state when I read it, just because I know it's based on times in Afghanistan, and it's just like historical fiction, but it's emotional because it's a story about friendship. But I don't know too much because I want to keep it, at a distance for now. But hopefully I'll get to it eventually. Number 6 on this list would have to be the Mistborn series by Brandy Sandy. Brandon Sanderson, The Final Empire. I've been pushing this down my TBR for so long. And here's why. Because Indigo does have the entire Mistborn series and like his other books. But the thing is that they're all in the mass market paperback version. And if you know anything about that, it's like the dinkiest like little book ever. And it's so compact in its text and it's so tiny. I get so overwhelmed when I read it like that. I just need like a full proper size copy of a hardcover paperback, whatever it is, so I can like read it properly, because I don't like it when it's too small. So that is very high on my list. And I feel like that's like epic fantasy 101. Like anyone who is like a big fan of that genre has read that book. Number 7 on this list is The Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. Another author in the epic fantasy genre that I have yet to read. Honestly, let's be real. I don't read a lot of epic fantasy, but I want to. It's just hard just because the copies I want aren't at Indigo. I usually have to order them online, either internationally, which is like pretty expensive, or through Amazon, or which they just don't have it. So it's just like a predicament. So moving on to number 8 on this list would have to be The Lies of Locke Lamora. So this one is all about like a gang related heist sort of story with really complex characters and just that more darker type of vibe. And they're criminals, so obviously they're morally gray like. Obviously Peaky Blinders is like my obsession as of last year, so reading this book is supposed to be like a very equivalent type of atmosphere you'll get. So that was what I was really hoping with. But the only problem is that there's only 2 books in the series released. I think there's supposed to be another one. I just don't know when. Moving on to number 9 on this list would have to be, sorry, I have to consult my list. I don't remember. All the Light We Cannot See. This book, it has won a Pulitzer Prize on its list. I forgot which year, but it's like a really critically acclaimed book. Now, I did pick it up at one point in 2022 from the library, but the problem is that I only got, I think, 50 pages into it. It was really good, but I had to return it because obviously stupid library fines. Can't hold it for too long. And it was exam season, so everything was just getting really backlogged, and it was just, I had to put it back for now. But I'm planning to actually buy that book just because the way it started and just the amount of praise that book gets is just something I feel like I need to buy. And it just looks amazing on my shelves, why not? Talks about their story going through the very dark times of World War II. So it is a bit of historical fiction, contemporary, but it has a very great writing so far. Like, it's very poetic. Everything the author writes makes sense. And it's just like, you know, when you read a book and it's just like, wow, like that's profound, and you know they know how to write. Like, that's the kind of appeal that book gives. Number 10 on this list would have to be a very, very famous BookTok author, and that is none other than Miss Taylor Jenkins Reid. Any of her books honestly would be suitable in this position. The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, what's it called, Daisy Jones and the Six, Malibu Rising. Honestly, any of these I would accept because I haven't read any of them. Like, I have to say, for BookTok authors, usually it's like a love-hate relationship, like Colleen Hoover for an example. But with Taylor Jenkins Reid, it is like consistently everyone loves her. So I feel like she's a good author to start with. Moving on to number 11 this list, it would have to be Jujutsu Kaisen, a manga or anime I really need to get into. I know I'm very, very behind. Don't start. I don't know. I have to get into that series. I haven't watched it, let alone read it. So I'm gonna do a bit of both. I don't know much what it's about other than it's like a bit of urban fantasy, I think. It could just be epic fantasy, I don't know. Anyway, all I know is that there's a guy named Gojo. I don't know if he's the white-haired guy or he's the pink-haired guy. Either way, those are the only 2 people I like recognize from that series. Moving on to number 12 on this list would have to be Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. Now this is, I believe, a historical fiction, contemporary type of book that really focuses on the issues of marriage or running away from the marriage. It's something to do with that, but it's very compelling of a story that's very different. It's like a coming of age story. I don't know if I'm wording it properly because I haven't read it yet or at all. So I know it's like about that kind of idea, and it's just like the relationship the characters build with each other is really compelling, and it's just like the story arc overall that's really good. And it's nice to see a different kind of story, especially written by an author of color, which would be amazing. And I really want to get to that because I know a lot of people love that book. Number 13 on my most anticipated reads list is Jade City by Fonda Lee. I do have this book. I just haven't read it yet. Mel Reads is like the main advocate for this book, I swear, just because it's always on her shelves. She's always reading it, and I just always see it on her channel. For good reasons though. Like, I know it's like really popular as like one of the most like famous fantasy books in the genre that everyone knows about, but I don't know the reason why. Like, I know people say, you know, the characters are great, you know, there's romance and there's like blah, 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 but like, why? You know what I mean? Number 14 on this list, we're almost halfway through, guys, almost halfway through. And that is Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. So I have read ACOTAR. Throne of Glass, I have read the first chapter because my try a chapter challenge, but I have not read the rest of the series. That being said, do I think I want to buy the whole series? They're like easily like $17 a book, and obviously get pricier the thicker you go. And as you can see, I'm running out of shelf space here. So I'm debating, is it worth buying it or should I just get it from the library? Either way, I know it's a very well beloved series. She is a very critically acclaimed, I wouldn't say, okay, hold on, sorry. I wouldn't say she's a critically acclaimed author, but like she's very popular in BookTok and every other space. I don't want to get shit on. That's just that. Number 15 on this list will be Harry Potter, the entire series. Let me get this straight, just so we don't cause any mayhem on this channel. I have watched all the Harry Potter movies. I love them. My sister and I have rewatched, I swear, like 17 times over. It's like a ritual around the Christmas time, just because it just suits the whole atmosphere at the time. Anyway, I have never finished the entire series. I have read the first book, and that was like last year-ish. I loved it. Really, really great read. And so I'm hoping to actually read the rest of them this year. A, because it's been a long time. B, because I have obviously never read them before. And C, I have to return the box set of the books to my cousin because I've hoarded it for like over a year and a half now. And she needs it back. Number 16 on this list will have to be To Kill a Mockingbird by the author whose name I don't remember. I'm sorry, but you're right here. Anyway, so that book, again, is, I don't know if it's classified as a classic, but I would say it's a classic just because I feel like a lot of people know of the book. Like, it's on every English courses list in high school, but I just didn't choose to read it at the time. Either it was because it was assigned to a different group or I just did not want to read it. I remember choosing a weirder book. Honestly, I should have just went with The Mockingbird. And I was thinking, you know what, why not? Just because I feel like the issues and the themes that are present in that book are really relevant towards today. And it just seems like a very interesting read overall. And it's not super long anyway. Number 17 on this list is going to be Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. I'm surprised too. Yes, I did not choose A Secret History just because I feel like everyone knows that book. That is technically on my list too. But I feel like Goldfinch just appeals to me more. From what I heard from Christiane Books, like her channel is just amazing. I love her aesthetic. So she said this is one of her favorite books from 2022. And I'm thinking, you know what? The sound of this book and just the synopsis she was giving sounds really entertaining. So it's basically like, I don't know if it's historical fiction. I think it's more contemporary fiction, just set in the time period of a past, like in 1940s. I think it's post-World War II at the time. So the Goldfinch essentially is like a famous artwork from a museum, and essentially I think the museum blew up, and a boy who's experienced a lot of tragedy in his life, especially in his family, has one day picked it up and is doing something with the artwork to obviously, you know, help his life in some way. So I know it's sort of a coming of age story, and it deals a lot with, you know, very traumatic events, and it's emotional, those and compelling characters, and it's just the writing. I'm pretty sure she's a great writer because everyone loves her books, but I'm really excited just because I love that kind of atmosphere. Number 18 on this list is a very thing I just honestly needed some other book to fill up on this list, and that is basically for me to read more One Piece chapters. Throughout the year, every year, I always read the One Piece chapters as they release on Viz Media's website because I'm up to date with it. I don't need to buy it if they release for free, so I just read them as they come out. That's just simple. Now let's move on to number 19 on this list, which is Anxious People by Frederick Backman. I read a Backman book, Man Called Ove, loved it, highly recommend. Other than that, I feel like his writing is really good. He writes relatively short books, which I like. I don't want a book that's like super long and I have to get myself into a zone to really get through it. Like, it's just simple. And I know his books are usually more emotionally taxing. Clearly, my read this year, like my list this year, is going to be a very emotional journey. Moving on to number 20 on this list would have to be Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. This book has been claimed as Bridgerton and meets fantasy fae. And like you clash them together and you get this book. And I was so excited just because when I found out about this book, Bridgerton season 2 had just finished. And so everyone was on the hype about it. Like, it was amazing. I watched it. Great show. And obviously you want to read something at the time that's very similar. And that book has been like pigeonholed as like the book to read if you like that. So I'm very intrigued because it is, you know, fantasy romance, but in the Regency vibes mixed with fae. So I feel like that's super appealing. Number 21 on this list. We're almost done, I promise. Number 21 is actually a release coming out this year called The Brothers Hawthorne by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Now this book, I'm confused because obviously you have the Inheritance Games trilogy, but this book, The Brothers Hawthorne, isn't really said to be like a standalone or a novella after the events of The Final Gambit. So I'm confused. Is it supposed to be a continuation of the story, or is it like a novella or a sequel series after it? So I'm kind of confused. But what I do know is that it's set in the perspectives of Grayson and Jameson, the two Hawthorne grandsons. So maybe there's hope for one of the relationships after all. I'm joking. Okay, let's be real. I don't think the relationship between Avery and one of the grandsons will change. Let's be real. I don't like it, but I don't think it will change. Will I keep my hopes up? Slightly, I probably will. Just because, like, I wish it would happen, but clearly it won't. Anyway, that's just my thought. Also, the name is really intriguing. The Brothers Hawthorne. At first, I was really confused. Like, what is with, like, the syntax of this sentence here? And I saw from a post someone wrote is that it kind of reminds them of the Brothers Grimm. If you didn't know, they wrote the original like fairy tale, like Cinderella, like Ring Around the Rosie, like those kinds of things that were spun on like very dark versions of the original stories. And so I don't know what kind of direction Jennifer's going in that book, but I'm very excited just because I love that world and the character's really interesting. And it's nice to get a different perspective from Avery once in a while, you know? Number 22 on this list, the second last one, and it is The Villain's Duology by V.E. Schwab. Honestly, this should just be the V.E. Schwab number just because I haven't read any of her books yet. There's a lot of authors who I have never read a book from. I'm sorry. This is the year for change though. Anyway, so The Villain's Duology is especially, appealing to me just because, again, I love the villain characters. I'm not necessarily the hero kind of person. I'm a villain lover, but obviously within reason. Anyway, so I heard this is like a well-loved series by her. Morally great characters. It is fantasy. There's somewhat a bit of romance in it. And obviously it's centered around people who commit like very nefarious type of crimes, that kind of thing. But it's told in the perspective of a villain, which is very interesting. Oh, I thought that was a spider. That was not a spider. And now let's finish off with the last book on my most anticipated reads list with House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. So I did pick up House in the Cerulean Sea because of my Try Your Chapter challenge, and I have to say I absolutely loved the beginning. It's just, I don't know, even though I read one chapter, which is I think less than 5 pages, there was something so interesting about the main guy's point of view and just the way the orphanage worked and just the children and their unique magical abilities. Now they're all deemed as outcasts, and I don't remember what his specific role was to do in that orphanage or why he was there, but he was like interviewing or like questioning the headmaster of the orphanage, and it seems like there's supposed to be like a budding relationship there. I don't know, but I know it's supposed to be a very unique and a very heartwarming type of story that's very cozy, and it just hits all the feels. So that basically concludes my top must reads for 2023. Let me know in the comments which ones you are hoping to read this year and what your reading goal is. Thanks for watching. See you next time.